Stay tuned. Ahead, I'll talk with Steve Barry about the latest installment in the popular Cotton Malone series. In the Medici Return, Cotton Malone goes to Italy to solve a 500-year-old mystery. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner, and this is Some Books Considered. Steve Barry is the New York Times and #1 internationally best-selling author of 19 Cotton Malone novels, 5 standalone thrillers, 2 Luke Daniels adventures, and several works of short fiction. He joins us to talk about The Medici Return. Steve, welcome to Some Books Considered.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, this is the 19th book to feature Cotton Malone. And for those who may be new to this series, tell us about Cotton Malone. Who is he?
He's a retired Justice Department agent. He lives in Copenhagen. He runs an old bookshop, and he gets himself into trouble all the time, unfortunately. He's been around now for 19 books, which is quite gratifying to have him here. I think his appeal is he's not a Daniel Craig kind of superhero kind of guy. He doesn't work out. He's not all buffed up. He's just an ordinary fella who can do extraordinary things when called upon. So I think his appeal has been just that. He's like the guy next door. The reader, though, shouldn't be put off by the fact that there's 19 books. I don't write them so that you have to read them in any particular order. You can pick them up in any order you want. And so if you've never read me before, you can start with this one right here.
So let's talk about the inspiration for this latest novel.
Well, I was in Tuscany. I actually went to Tuscany. I had never been there before. I'd never seen any of that before. And I spent about 10 days there. I went to Siena. I went to Florence. I got to see the Palio, the famous horse race. I went back again and did some additional research. So the reader's going to get a full understanding of Tuscany and Siena and the Palio and the Medici family itself and its extent and its power all through Europe. The fact that it basically went extinct in 1743. And then you're going to learn a little bit about the Vatican and a little bit about Italian politics, too.
So there's a lot wrapped up in this story. And there's a mystery here. So tell us about the plot of The Medici Return.
Well, it occurred to me, I learned there's a fact, Pope Julius II in the early part of the 16th century was dying. And he wanted to replenish the coffers of the Vatican that he had pretty much drained in fighting wars. We don't know where he got the money from. So it occurred to me, what if he got it from the Medici? They were the bankers to the Pope. It made perfect sense. They could get the money. And they make a loan to him. But they make a loan to him on one condition. You have to give me a pledge of Christ. Your sworn promise by the Pope in writing before God that money will be paid back to the Medici. Well, that debt still is there today. So Cotton Malone is on the hunt for not only that document, but also for the last Medici. What happened to the Medici? This family was in power from 1200 to 1743. Then it went extinct. There were no more. All gone. But it occurred to me, what happens if one survived? What if somebody was still out there? What if there was a last Medici still there? And so Cotton's on the hunt for both of these. There are other people on the hunt to stop him from getting those things. And who's going to be the next pope and who's going to be the next prime minister of Italy all hangs in the balance.
You've been living with Cotton Malone for 19 novels now. How has he evolved over that time?
He's changed a lot. The Cotton Malone from the Templar Legacy, which is the first book, and the Cotton Malone that you see today is a different guy. He's matured. He's gotten more introspective. He's also gotten a little more emotional than he was before. The character has changed. In every one of the Cotton Malone novels, I explore a different aspect of his personality. I made a point to focus on one aspect of his personality. So over the course of the books, you learn a little bit about Cotton in great detail in each one. And this one is no exception to that as we focus on, he's dealing with something that came up at the end of the last book. I don't want to say what that is. So if you've not read the book, I don't want to give it away, but something that came out of the end of the last book, and he's dealing with that now. He's dealing with having to wrestle with that and what the consequences of that are going to be. So yes, he's changed, and he's got to change. You don't want to keep a character the same all the way. He's got to evolve.
Now, you mentioned that you were able to visit the settings for this book. But what other research challenges did this book pose for you?
Well, I didn't know anything about this area. This was virgin territory for me. I'd never been to Florence, so I did not understand any of the history. I knew nothing about the Medici, nothing at all. So it was fairly virgin. That was probably the biggest challenge. This really is just an area I've not read a lot about, but now that I have, I'm glad I did. It's amazing. The history there is incredible. Florence is an incredible city. The reader's going to get a full appreciation of that area. I wove the settings in there. There's a lot of Florence. There's a lot of Siena. There's a lot of Tuscany in this book.
I'm talking with Steve Barry about the Medici Return, and our conversation continues in a moment. If you're enjoying this discussion, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. And thank you. So you've got all this research that you did, and there's a lot of historical information that you could include in the book, but you have to find that balance between how much of this factual information do I give, but not get in the way of the fiction that I need to create for the narrative.
Oh yeah, I mean, mixing information with action is the hardest thing that in my genre. It's the most difficult. Readers of my genre want the information. That's why they read the book. They want information, but they don't want too much because I'm not writing a textbook. I'm not writing a history book. I'm writing a form of commercial entertainment. So I've got to have action. I've got to have all these things mixed together. Too much of one, too little of one, you get in a mess. And I'm not saying I'm great at mixing those two together. I'm just saying I'm cognizant of it. I'm very cognizant that you need to mix those two together as best you can so you don't get too much, too little of either one. And I think after 35 years, I've kind of got a handle on it now. I think I've got it down where I can mix them together, fairly well.
So in terms of process, you have all this information. Does that require you to outline the whole thing before you start, or do you know where you're going and kind of plug in the details along the way?
It would be wonderful to outline it all the way through before you start. It would sure make the writing process a whole lot simpler, but unfortunately, it's just not possible. There's no time to do that. That would take 6 months or more to do an outline. So what I do is I outline about 100 pages ahead. About 100 pages I try to get done before I start writing. And then as I'm writing, I try to stay 50 pages ahead of myself. If I can stay 50 to so pages ahead, which is about 10 chapters or so ahead, if I can stay ahead of myself each time, that really helps. But unfortunately, you write faster than you plot, always. So I catch up. And so I have to stop and I have to plot. And if you already had it all plotted out, it'd be great. You just boom, 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 go right all the way through. But unfortunately, it doesn't work like that.
Since Cotton Malone is a character you know very well, are there times when you're moving along in a novel and suddenly you just get this feeling that Cotton wouldn't do that after all, or he would do something different? So you have to kind of shift course a little bit to fit with how you think he would react to what you've already set up.
Yeah, that happens all the time where I do something that sounded pretty cool yesterday. It doesn't sound so cool today. So I do a lot of that. Writing is rewriting. You have to be prepared to rewrite. So I do a lot of rewriting. I do a lot of changing. Things that, as I said, sounded really good a few days ago don't sound so good right now. And that's why I go through my novels around 50 or 60 times. I read the manuscript 50 to 60 times. So I read it so much that I never want to read it again as long as I live, to be honest with you, because I've read it so many times. But that's how you get that feel of what should be there and what shouldn't be there.
As you mentioned, Cotton Malone changes with each book. And is that part of the reason you've been able to keep him fresh and keep him interesting to you, let alone the readers?
Absolutely, because otherwise I would have gotten bored with him a long time ago. He's also going to change a lot in the next few years. I'm going to change up his world. His world's been a little too stable for the last few years. So there's going to be some upheaval in Cotton's world over the next 3 to 4 books. That keeps it fresh for me and hopefully keeps it fresh for the readers too. So things don't just become the same. We want to keep things moving along the same but different. That's the whole trick.
Now, I understand that there's maybe a streaming series in the works or a movie in the works about Cotton Malone. What can you tell us about that?
There's discussion. There's talk about it. We'll see if it actually happens or not. I don't know. I don't hold out a lot of hope for that. We'll see. I've had so much interest in the books over the last 20 years, but a little more serious interest of late. So we'll see. It'd be kind of fun to see it come to life.
So, as you pointed out, there are more Cotton Malone books to come. You're going to shake things up a little bit, but I
Mhm.
know you write other series as well. So, what's next for you?
Well, we have something very interesting coming in July, July the 11th. We have a new book coming out. I wrote it 35 years ago. It was the second manuscript I ever wrote in my life. Wasn't in good shape then, but during the pandemic, I rewrote it, and I got gave it to Grand Central, and they agreed to publish it. It's a it's kind of a little autobiographical. It's about a lawyer in a small Georgia town that gets caught up in something conspiracy gets caught up in where the local paper company has a very unique way of controlling its cost. It's called The List. And if you like John Grisham and Harlan Coben and David Baldacci, you're going to like this book. It's a little different for me. It's Steve Berry like you've never read him before. Pure suspense thriller. Comes out July the 11th. So we'll see how that goes.
And before I let you go, I want to talk with you about History Matters. This is an organization that you and your wife created. Tell us about the work you do through History Matters.
We created it to help local communities raise money for their historic preservation projects. And we've done about 80 projects around the country. We raised about $3.5 million. We go into the community and we usually teach a writer's workshop. And that's a 4-hour workshop where we teach writing. You buy your way in with a contribution, and all of that money goes to the project. We don't charge to come and we don't charge expenses. We pay that out of our pocket. And we've helped local communities do all kinds of things: buildings, posters, books, cemeteries. Man, you name it, we've helped raise money for it. Flag, we did a flag in Houston, a historic flag, all kinds of things that we've done. It's quite gratifying. We enjoy it. We hope to keep doing it.
The novel is The Medici Return by Steve Berry. It's another in the Cotton Malone series. Steve, thank you for talking with me today.
Thanks for having me.
If you'd like to purchase The Medici Return, I've placed a link for you in the description below. And if you enjoy this discussion, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. Meanwhile, here are 2 more books you might find interesting. I'm Dan Skinner. Thank you for watching this edition of Some Books Considered.